I'm not proud of where my head was that night. 3 weeks after my fiancé called our wedding off, 3 weeks after chewing the words "I'm sorry" until they tasted like chalk and ash, I walked into a crowded bar because silence had turned into an echo chamber. It was either sit alone in my apartment listening to the refrigerator hum like a metronome for grief, or step into a room buzzing with other people's lives and try to pretend I had one too. I picked the room. It wasn't fancy. Brick walls that pretended to be original, a chalkboard menu written in the bartender's patient cursive, a small jazz trio in the corner playing something mellow enough to make the ice in my glass feel like it had rhythm. I slid onto a stool near the end of the bar. Not to be noticed, not to be brave, just to be somewhere I could be one of many. I ordered something I wouldn't have to think about club soda with lime, because thinking had been taking me places I didn't want to go. If grief has a smell, it's citrus and soap on a winter coat that won't let go of last season. The man to my left noticed me first. Or maybe he noticed the space I was trying to keep around me and decided he could stand in it. Either way, he leaned, smiled, and let words fall that were supposed to sound like charm but landed like coins at the bottom of a jar. He asked questions I didn't want to answer. "Where are you from? Who are you here with? How about I buy your next drink?" I told him no, once, twice, then with a tight smile that always made my mother proud because it looked polite. He laughed like I'd told him a joke and leaned closer, breath heavy with hops and intention. There's a ladder of ways women learn to say no in public. Polite, firm, clear, loud, then the one no one wants to climb to, the one with the shaking hands and the instincts that start counting exits. I was at rung 3, careful and clear, when his hand touched my elbow. "Hey," he said, "relax. I'm just being friendly." I don't know why that was the moment fear crystallized. Maybe because friendliness shouldn't need contact. Maybe because for the first time since Nathan left me with a ring-shaped sunburn on my finger, I realized how quickly kindness can be misnamed. A table of coworkers a few stools down was laughing. The drummer brushed the snare with soft wire. The bartender was rinsing a shaker, eyes on the sink. I could have shouted. I could have stood up. I could have said many things. I froze. Then a voice leaned in behind me, quiet enough that it threaded the needle between my heartbeat and the snare drum. "Pretend we came together." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, low and even, like a hand offered in a crowd. Before I could turn, he stepped into the space on my right and set a coaster on the bar. A small, ordinary act that said everything without saying much. He put his phone down on the coaster and his keys next to mine, his body angled so we were shoulder to shoulder, not touching, but close enough that a stranger would have to decide whether to ignore what this looked like. The man on my left looked him up and down, annoyed. "We're talking," he said. "Then I'm interrupting," the newcomer replied, the calm in his voice anchored, not aggressive, not apologetic, just certain. He looked at me, not through me. "Ready to go?" It was a script, and I knew my line. I nodded. The newcomer laid a couple of bills on the bar with the casual generosity of someone who doesn't want to involve the staff in whatever this is. He waited for me to stand. I did. He didn't touch me. He didn't perform. He just started walking toward the door like it was the most normal thing in the world to leave a place with someone you cared about getting home safe. The man on my left made a sound half scoff, half something I didn't want to name but he didn't follow. Maybe because the bartender, now paying attention, had lifted his chin in that universal "you okay?" question, and the newcomer had answered with a small nod that said, "We're good." Maybe because sometimes the simplest interruption is the most powerful, a presence that refuses to play the game. Outside, winter nipped my cheeks and made everything feel cleaner. The street was crowded enough to breathe, string lights looping from one lamppost to another like someone had tried to connect stars and gotten distracted by coffee breaks. I exhaled. I realized I'd been holding my breath for the last 5 minutes. "Thank you," I said. He smiled like gratitude was a language he understood but didn't need me to speak perfectly. "You're welcome." I took him in, then tall, not in the way doors notice but in the way coats drape right. White shirt under a dark jacket, open at the collar. Hands steady, hair that had decided on its own direction this morning and he'd made peace with it. A face that didn't demand to be recorded, didn't try for angles. Just kind. If kindness can be a bone structure, he had it. "I'm Madison," I said, because names make things real. "Jacob," he replied. "Do you need me to walk you somewhere, or would you prefer I stand here and vanish like a decent ghost?" The joke was gentle and deliberate. He was giving me a way to choose. "Can we?" I gestured to the end of the block where the air felt less like a door and more like a road. "Just walk for a minute?" "Of course." We walked. Our steps found a pace between the city's pulse and my own stuttered rhythm. We didn't talk at first. I listened to the sound of shoes on concrete and the fizz of conversations spilling out of restaurant doors when they opened. My heart dropped from my throat back into my chest, still beating, a little embarrassed. "Do you do that often?" I asked, once words felt safe again. "Rescue strangers from awkward situations?" "I try to notice people," he said. "And sometimes noticing is enough. Sometimes it's not." Havne Turnstring speaking as we crossed a street. He waited for me to step up onto the curb before he did. Not because I needed it, but because noticing is a habit that grows other habits. The quiet between us wasn't empty. It felt like a porch light left on, someone's home, just in case. "Was it obvious?" I asked, half laughing at myself, half afraid of the answer. "That I was uncomfortable?" "Obvious enough," he said. But also he shook his head, choosing words with care. "You don't owe anyone a performance of discomfort to deserve help." There it was, a sentence that slid into a space in me like it had always been meant to live there. We reached a corner where the street spilled into a small park, bare trees like ink lines on a washed blue sky. I breathed. I felt a little foolish. I felt a lot relieved. I thought about Nathan, about how 3 weeks is both infinity and a blink, about how love can end in a sentence and leave paragraphs unwritten. I remembered the ring I'd slid into the back of a drawer, and how the circle had left an echo on my skin. Jacob didn't ask why my eyes looked like I hadn't been sleeping. He didn't ask anything at all. He stood with me, shoulders angled to the world like we were a pocket of quiet in a city that didn't owe us one. "I'm okay to get home," I said finally. "But I'm grateful, too." He nodded. "Then I'll walk you to the corner where you'll say, 'This is good,' and I'll say, 'Get home safe,' and life will pretend to be a movie for 5 seconds." I laughed. It came out unexpectedly and sounded like I hadn't forgotten how. "Is this your niche?" I asked, teasing, because humor sometimes reboots the heart. "Professional exit strategy consultant? Only on Thursdays," he deadpanned. "Volunteer program. Tuesdays are for replacing batteries and fire alarms." We reached the corner. The city breathed. So did I. "This is good," I said. "Get home safe," he replied, as promised. Then he hesitated. Just a fraction, like you do when the moment itself suggests a bridge you hadn't prepared to cross. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small card, heavy stock, simple font. He held it out but didn't insist. "In case you ever need someone to walk you out again," he said. "Or in, if that's the braver direction." I took the card. "Jacob Carter," I read. "Architect." "Guilty," he said. "Thank you again," I said, and meant it twice. He nodded once, like a bow to the scene, and turned back the way we'd come. I watched him go for a few steps, then tucked the card into my coat pocket like a small, practical talisman and started toward the subway. On the train, the city unfolded itself in the dark glass of the window. My reflection sat across from me, tired but less haunted. I thought about the way help showed up tonight without fuss, without claim. I thought about how safety, when offered with humility, feels like permission to be soft again. By the time I climbed the stairs to my apartment, the air had changed. The refrigerator still hummed, but now it sounded like a neighbor instead of a jury. I kicked off my shoes, made tea I wasn't sure I wanted, and sat on the floor, leaning against the couch like I was 22 again, and furniture was an abstract concept. The card on the coffee table caught the light. It looked like an option. I didn't call. What I did was open my laptop and pull up an application I'd bookmarked months ago and told myself I might fill out someday. A program for doctors willing to spend a month or 3 in rural or post-disaster communities, places where clinics were understaffed, supplies were always almost enough, and you had to get good at inventorying not just gauze and antibiotics, but patience. The program had a questionnaire that started with logistics and ended up somewhere near soul-searching. Why do you want to serve this community? What do you hope to learn? What will you need to unlearn? I stared at the blinking cursor and felt something stir. Not bravery, exactly. More like the willingness to tell myself the truth. Why do you want to go? Because being needed is different from being possessed. Because I'm a good doctor on paper and a restless one in practice. And maybe I want to remember that healing is a verb. Because there's a version of me that didn't say yes to convenience so many times that no started tasting selfish. Because I can't fix what got broken in my life tonight, but I can set bones and stitch wounds, and sometimes the body teaches the heart. I typed. I wrote about the patients whose names I carry like smooth stones. The woman who kept apologizing for bleeding, the man who turned his cap in his hands while I told him the word malignant, the kid with the bee sting who was braver than both adults combined. I wrote about how hospitals can feel like mazes where people think the Minotaur is time. I wrote about wanting to be part of a team that shows up where people don't expect anyone to. When I hit submit, the confirmation screen was hilariously casual. Thank you for your application. We'll be in touch. I closed the laptop, stared at the ceiling, and let my body remember what rest feels like. I slept hard and long, like my nervous system had negotiated a truce. 2 days later, the program coordinator called while I was in line at the pharmacy, holding a basket with toothpaste, batteries, and a stubborn optimism that had made it into my shopping list without asking. Her voice was bright but not chirpy. She told me about a mountain town called Willow, near a river that pretended to be bigger in spring and settled down by August, a place where a storm last year had taken roofs and left resolve. The small clinic there needed an internist who didn't mind learning where the supplies were by opening drawers. Could I be there in a week? I said yes, before fear could draft a counter-proposal. That night, I told my mother, who listened and then said, "Good," with the kind of fierceness that sounds like a blessing when your mother says it. She asked if I'd be safe. I told her I'd be as safe as a person can be when they remember to notice and trust their gut. She asked if I'd bring warm socks. I promised I would. She asked about Nathan only once, a simple, "Have you heard from him?" And I said, "No," which was the truth, and also a relief. I packed badly the first time, then unpacked and did it right the second. Scrubs, fleece, the good stethoscope, the pen light that doesn't flicker, the notebook where I write things I don't want to forget, dosages, small kindnesses, jokes from old men that land better than they should. I left the ring-shaped sunburn alone. It was fading. The morning I left, the city looked like a friend I needed a break from, the kind you love more when you stand at a distance for a while. My driver asked where I was headed. "Willow," I said, and he nodded like that explained something about both of us. The mountains rose slowly as the bus found its way into bigger skies. My phone lost service and I felt lighter. The air outside the window looked like you could drink it. The river kept showing up like a silver ribbon someone had been generous with. When we pulled into town, one main street, a diner with a pie sign that took its job seriously, a hardware store that probably knew everyone's middle name, I felt the elastic in my chest relax. At the clinic, the doorbell sounded like it had been installed by someone who wanted the chime to laugh softly. I met Gail, the nurse who runs everything, actually, even if the sign on the door insists this is a shared project. She hugged me like we'd seen each other yesterday and then handed me a clipboard with forms that admitted they were a formality. "We're happy you're here," she said, and meant it in a way that made welcome feel like a verb. The exam rooms smelled like disinfectant and lemon, the good kind. There was a cupboard labeled Sutures and Serendipity, because someone had a sense of humor about the way supplies appear when you root around the back of a shelf. I put my bag down. I wrote my name on a piece of tape and stuck it to a locker. There was a pink post-it note inside that said, "Don't forget to eat." I decided to believe that was for me. My first patient was a boy of 9, with a sprained wrist and a grin like he'd borrowed it from summer. He'd fallen out of a tree, trying to retrieve a kite that had gotten ambitious. His mother told me this like she was both exasperated and secretly proud of the physics involved. I examined him, asked him to make a fist, wiggle fingers, tell me if this hurts now. He told me about the tree like it had been a co-conspirator. I wrapped the wrist, gave instructions, made sure the mother heard the part about no climbing for a week, which everyone knows means 2 days and then we'll see. They left smiling. I exhaled. At lunch, Gail handed me a sandwich that tasted like someone had decided mayo deserved redemption. "There's a community meeting tonight," she said. "Town hall, you should come. Good place to learn faces, and there's pie." "What's the issue?" I asked. "Water lines," she said. "And the community center rebuild." "Who's leading that?" I asked, and Gail smiled like she'd been waiting for me to ask. "You'll meet him." That evening, the town hall filled like a living room that can hold everyone. Chairs scraped politely. Kids drew on the back of agendas with crayons that had seen better days. An older man in a cap stood and told a joke before the meeting started, because that's how you season a conversation. Then he sat, and the person standing at the front clapped his hands once, not to call attention, but to gather it like you gather kindling. "I'm Jacob," he said. I didn't drop anything, I didn't gasp, but the moment did, that thing moments do when an earlier scene sends you a postcard. He looked different here, still in a white shirt, sleeves rolled, the jacket traded for a flannel thrown over the back of a chair. He was in his element, and his element turned out to be building things and then making sure the people who'd use them felt like they had fingerprints on the plans. He didn't see me at first. He was talking about pipes, about gravity being both a law and a teacher, about how water prefers a path, but will forgive you if you ask it nicely and build accordingly. He talked about a community center with a roof that wouldn't complain in February, and a kitchen that could feed 100 if it had to. He talked about budgets without making anyone fall asleep, and timelines like they were promises he intended to keep. When the meeting broke into questions, Gail tugged me gently by the sleeve. "Come on," she said. "You should meet the guy who makes our building stop leaking." Rived was here. Jacob turned as we approached, eyes already smiling because that's what they do when he thinks he's about to hear something useful. He saw Gail. Then he saw me. For a half second, the bar came back, the lights, the door, the voice in my ear. Then it faded, replaced by a room full of people who would all know if we pretended not to recognize each other, and also probably write a folk song about it. He smiled. It was surprised and pleased and steady. "Madison," he said, and made my name feel like a memory and not an accident. "What are the odds?" "Statistically interesting," I said, because I was still a little me. "Hi." "Is herself." Gail looked between us with the satisfaction of a woman who has just discovered she knew something before you told her. "So you two met in the city," Jacob said. "Briefly." "Briefly," I echoed, grateful for the word that carried enough and not too much. He held out his hand like the first time, imagined but not taken. I shook it. His palm was warm from speaking with his hands. He looked at Gail. "We'll need clinic input on the community center kitchen. Storage, food safety. Madison can help?" "I can," I said, surprised at how easily the yes arrived. "Great," he said, easy as a frame finding its wall. "Welcome to Willow." He did have designed us so, and just like that, the bar and the city, and the voice that had rescued me, resolved into a new context. A town with a river to tame, a center to rebuild, and a team that had just quietly, without fanfare, added me to the list. The morning after the town hall, Willow felt like a place that wakes up early on purpose. frost on the clinic steps, coffee that tasted like someone had apologized to the beans before brewing them. Gail handed me a stack of charts and a smile. "Light morning," she said, which turned out to mean steady enough to forget your phone exists. I settled into the rhythm, fast vitals, stories, small jokes to loosen shoulders. A rancher came in with a cough he'd been negotiating with for a month. A teacher needed a refill and, underneath that, permission to rest. A teenager rolled an ankle and pretended it didn't hurt until I looked him in the eye and asked who he was trying to impress. The medicine itself wasn't flashy. It was my niche. Community care where outcomes depend as much on trust as on treatment plans. At noon, Jacob appeared with a blueprint tube under his arm and the kind of grin you bring when you think you might have good news. "Borrow your doctor for 20 minutes?" he asked Gail. She waved us off with her sandwich. We took over an empty exam room and unrolled paper across the counter. Lines and notes, elevations and little penciled arrows that looked like optimism wearing a hard hat. "Community center kitchen," he said. We pushed for better storage and a prep sink. "Now I want to make sure the clinic can use it for health fairs, vaccination drives, cooking classes, anything that makes healthy cheaper than easy." I traced the traffic flow with a finger. "Cold storage near the door so deliveries don't cross prep," I said. "Hand wash sink where you can't forget it, and a corner where kids can help without being underfoot. If we want behavior change, we make participation irresistible." "Okan," he wrote while I talked, and it felt less like advising and more like composing together. When we finished, he capped his pencil and looked at me with that steady attention again. "We'll need clinic input at the planning meeting tonight," he said. "You in?" "I'm in." The afternoon brought weather clouds that decided to take their job seriously. A pressure headache in 3 patients arrived like uninvited cousins. I wrote scripts for hydration, rest, and, when needed, the meds that quiet the drums. Between rooms, I caught myself smiling at nothing. Not romance, something more ordinary, and, because of that, more rare. Usefulness. At closing, Gail pointed her chin toward the door. "Go," she said. "If you show up late to a meeting about cabinets, they'll store the forks where God can't find them." The town hall was warmer than last night. Plans went up on easels. Neighbors gathered in clusters that mixed ages and arguments. Jacob split us into groups. Water lines, kitchen, accessibility, budget. I took kitchen with 2 grandmothers who run bake sales like supply chains and a high schooler whose eyes said, "Chef." We argued cheerfully about shelves and spices, sinks and splatters. Every time the room got loud, it wasn't conflict, it was commitment, expressed at different volumes. On my way out, Jacob walked me to the steps. "Same corner as last night," he said softly, smiling. "Get home safe." "Copy that," I said. And for the first time in a long time, the walk back felt like a road towards something not a way. By the 3rd morning, Willow had started teaching me its calendar. The river spoke first shift, the bakery spoke second, and the mountains kept the closing hour. I woke before my alarm, made coffee in the clinic's break room that tasted marginally less apologetic, and found a sticky note from Gail. "House calls today. Bring the good bandages and your listening face." We loaded a tote BP cuff, pulse ox, a few meds, tape that likes skin but lets go. House calls are my favorite kind of medicine. They remind you the body has a context. Our first stop was a trailer at the edge of town where Mrs. Alvarez Silver Braid, proud posture lived with her sister. Diabetes, stiff knees, stubborn independence. She welcomed us like family and argued with me about salt like it was a political platform. I checked feet, adjusted meds, and traded recipes for beans that don't need bacon to taste like home. On the way out, she pressed a paper bag into my hands. "Pan dulce," she said, for thinking like a person first. Back at the clinic, a farmer walked in, holding his hand like it contained a secret. It did, a cut from an argument with barbed wire. We cleaned, closed, talked tetanus, laughed about the way fences and tempers both need maintenance. He left with stitches and a bandage that looked like a vote for tomorrow. At noon, Jacob texted Gail had given him my number with the breezy confidence of someone who considers herself logistics for fate. "Site walk," he wrote. 15 minutes from the clinic. I asked Gail. She lifted the tote and shooed me. "Go make sure they put outlets where the coffee makers want to live," she said. The construction site smelled like fresh lumber and plans. Framed walls stood like sentences missing verbs. Jacob waved me over and handed me a hard hat with a sticker that said, "Hello. I build hope." I tried not to smile and failed. He took me through the kitchen footprint again, this time in 3 dimensions. Where the walk-in would go, the window that would let us see the play area, the path from loading dock to storage that didn't cross cooking stations. "If a space wants to teach healthy habits," I said, stepping through an imaginary doorway, "it should make the good choices the path of least resistance." He nodded, filed it, then flagged an electrician to talk circuits. We walked the waterline trench next. He explained elevation, head loss, the way a system forgives you if you design with humility. I told him about mornings at a city hospital when all the humility in the world couldn't fix a broken wristband printer. We traded niche frustrations like baseball cards, his inspectors, my insurance authorizations. Both of us laughed more than we complained. On our way back toward town, clouds shouldered the ridgeline. "Storm later," Jacob said. "We'll tarp the stacks." He paused. "Town dance this weekend fundraiser for the center. No pressure, just good to be there." "I'll come," I said, surprising myself with how easy that was. Willow had been handing me invitations all week, and saying yes felt like part of the treatment plan. Back at the clinic, Gail raised an eyebrow. I rolled my eyes in the international sign for "It's not like that." She grinned, victorious anyway, and slid a new chart my way. "Chest pain, room 2, she said, and just like that, the day refocused. In small towns, you learn to move from blueprint to heartbeat without spilling either. Room 2 meant business. The man on the cot, late 50s, sun-browned, the kind of strong that comes from lifting the world a little each day, sat forward with a hand pressed to his sternum like he was trying to negotiate with it. Gail had already run vitals. BP up, pulse fast. O2 fine. Pain radiating to the left arm. Nausea, sweat that didn't match the room's temperature. We moved in our practiced duet. Aspirin, ECG, nitro, oxygen ready. He gave me the look men give when they want permission to be vulnerable without losing face. I nodded. "You did the right thing coming in. The ECG wasn't a heart attack. Not now. But it wasn't innocent either." We called the nearest hospital with a cath lab and arranged transfer. While we waited, I sat on the rolling stool and asked the questions that matter: family history, stress, what normal had been for him last month. He told me about calves due soon, water rights meetings, a roof that still complained after the storm. When the ambulance took him, he squeezed my fingers and said, "You talk like my daughter. She makes me wear sunscreen." I told him to listen to both of us. After he left, the clinic's quiet felt earned. Gail handed me a cup of water and one of those smiles that says you did good without making a ceremony of it. "Town needs you," she said, and I felt the words settle somewhere between gratitude and responsibility. Late afternoon, Jacob appeared in the doorway with a knock on the frame, hat in his hands like he remembered the bar and wanted to reapply for good manners. "Kitchen committee wants a doctor's tiebreaker," he said. "Sinks versus shelving. Also, we'll have to reroute one water line. Found bedrock where plans swore there wouldn't be any. Bye." "Bedrock always shows up where pride drew a straight line," I said, and he laughed in that way people do when they recognize a truth from a different trade. We walked to the site through air that smelled like wet pine. The kitchen debate was lovingly fierce. I argued for a deeper prep sink and a hand wash station you had to walk past to get anywhere. "Make hygiene the easiest habit," I said. "Design is policy in wood and steel." The room nodded. Shelving could share, sanitation never should. Decision made. Outside, Jacob showed me the problem trench. Bedrock like a stubborn idea. He knelt, tapped it with a glove. We go around, he said. Costs a day, saves a headache. Mails it. Medicine's full of detours too, I said. The shortest path isn't always the safest. We stood a moment longer than necessary, sleeves brushing the air between us. He didn't reach for me. I didn't lean. We were learning the cadence of enough. On my way back to the clinic, the first drops of rain found my cheeks. Inside, Gail had set aside a stack of flyers for the weekend dance. Fundraiser, pie auction, a band whose name sounded like it had been workshopped on a porch, the Rusty Rivers. Wear shoes you can forgive, she advised. The floor's honest. Fact. That night in my tiny rental, I opened my notebook and made 2 lists: patients I wanted to follow up with, and ideas for the community center kitchen nutrition classes that tasted like dignity, not discipline. It struck me that both lists were the same work, designed for the behavior you hope to see. That's my niche, that's Jacob's too, in wood and pipe instead of muscle and blood. When I turned off the lamp, rain threaded the gutters. Somewhere, bedrock held. Somewhere else, water learned a kinder path. Saturday arrived with sun rinsed clean by last night's rain. The air carried sawdust, coffee, and the faint promise of fiddle music waiting its turn. Gail and I packed for a pop-up clinic at the community center site. BP cuffs, glucometers, flu shots, a crate of granola bars, labeled bribes. Jacob met us at the edge of the lot, hard hat tipped, smile easy. We'll run the health table near the shade, he said, already hauling a folding canopy like it weighed the same as his good intentions. People came. Families in chore boots, teenagers pretending they didn't want stickers after their shots and then asking if they could take 2-1 for a sibling. An older couple who brought a folder of labs and a pie as a consultation fee. We checked sugars, refilled inhalers, listened to lungs that told stories about wood stoves and winters. I taught a boy to count his pulse like it was a secret code. He taught me his dog's name in return. Between patients, Jacob pulled me toward the trench line. Quick survey? He asked. We're testing flow after the reroute. He handed me a clipboard with elevations and a pencil he'd chewed without noticing. We walked the new path, flagged stakes, made notes where gravity and stubborn geology negotiated a compromise. Design is a conversation, he said. Sometimes you speak, sometimes the hill speaks back. At noon, the generator hiccuped. The canopy flapped. Someone's toddler cried the way toddlers do when the universe forgets to consult them. Jacob jogged off to sweet-talk the machine into remembering its job while I crouched to the toddler's level and handed over a tongue depressor with a smiley face. We stabilized both situations within 5 minutes. Different toolkits. Same principle. Meet the need, keep the tone gentle. The pie auction sign-up passed our table. Gail nudged me. You baking? Medical ethics prevent me from poisoning donors, I said. Store-bought is a love language, she shot back, already writing my name with a flourish. Mid-afternoon, a man I hadn't seen before hovered at the edge of our health line. Crisp shirt, city shoes. He watched Jacob mark a 2x4 with the attention of someone clocking a process he doesn't trust yet. When our eyes met, his expression arranged itself into charm. Madison? He asked, like we were on a guest list. It's Nathan. The name didn't so much arrive as unfold. Letters I'd been holding in my jaw, relaxing into the air. He looked exactly like my memory wanted to dress him clean, plausible, a man who could talk his way through a fire alarm. What are you doing here? I asked, careful and not unkind. Business upstate, he said lightly. I heard you were out here. Thought I'd stop by. His gaze slid over the tents and timber. This is something, and my call to you create. Behind him, Jacob approached, reading the weather the way he reads clouds. I made the introduction with the economy of a triage nurse. Jacob, this is Nathan. Nathan, Jacob. They shook hands like men who have met the concept of each other before. No contest, just an assessment and a decision to behave. We're mid-clinic, I said, nodding toward the line that had started to form again. I need to keep going. Of course, Nathan said smoothly. Maybe later we could talk? Maybe, I said, which in medical terms means we'll see after labs, and in human terms means I'll decide when my pulse doesn't think it's on a treadmill. He stepped back. Jacob didn't step closer. He didn't need to. He handed me the next chart quietly, the way you pass someone a steadying rail. The clinic kept moving. So did the day. As we packed up in the golden light, Gail whispered, "You okay?" "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find that the words didn't wobble. That evening, the fundraiser dance turned the gym into a promise. Strings of lights, a floor that had forgiven 1,000 scuffs, and neighbors dressed in their good boots. The Rusty Rivers tuned up. Jacob found me near the bleachers and offered a hand. "No pressure," he said, smile crooked. "But if you want to add two-step to your skill set, my rates are reasonable." I laughed. "Bill it to the kitchen committee." We stepped onto the floor. The band started. It wasn't a movie, not exactly. It was better awkward, honest. A room held together by shared purpose, and a beat you could learn in 4 counts. The morning after the dance, Willow wore its hangover as sunshine. The gym still smelled faintly of sawdust and cinnamon. I woke with sore calves and the kind of tired that means you used your body for joy. Coffee, charts, 2 voicemails, and a sticky note from Gail. "Great spins. Also, call the hospital, our chest pain from Thursday is asking for you." I phoned between patients. He'd had a minor blockage, stented, prognosis good if he let rest be medicine. "Tell Madison I'll be ornery about it," he said, and I promised to translate ornery into adherence. At lunch, I walked the site with Jacob. The world looked busy in the way competence looks, teams moving like sentences that know where their verbs go. We paused at the kitchen framing. He tapped a stud. "We'll bring the hand wash sink out 6 inches, he said. "You were right, it needs to be unmissable." "Design the default," I said. "If wash hands requires a decision, we lose half the battle." He grinned. My niche agrees. Clouds gathered faster than the forecast. The ridge swallowed a line of blue and returned it as slate. Jacob checked his phone, then the sky, then the tarp plan. "We might get a squall," he said. "We'll stabilize stacks and secure the trench edges." "Clinic can prep," I said. "Storms wake up asthma." Back at the clinic, the air pressure migraine crowd arrived on schedule. We adjusted meds, refilled inhalers, coached breathing like we were teaching the diaphragm to trust again. In between rooms, Gail raised an eyebrow at me with the precision of a good friend. "Nathan texted me," I said, before she asked. "Wants to get coffee." "You going?" she asked. "I don't know yet." I tied a gown with more force than necessary. Last time we had coffee, he canceled our wedding. "Then, this time," Gail said gently, "you set the table. Your terms, your safety. They watching well huana who have to mind watch to who k." The squall arrived like a door slammed by weather. Rain hammered the clinic windows. The power blinked once, twice, then steadied with a hum that sounded defiant. Jacob texted, "We're good." Tarp held, checking the low spots. 10 minutes later, one trench wall softened. "We're sandbagging." When the storm passed, the town felt rinsed, edges darker, air clean. I stood under the clinic awning and watched water run where we preferred it. Jacob jogged up, wet hair, grin unbothered. "We lost an hour," he said, "but we learned where the site wants us to be humble." "That's tuition," I said. "Cheaper to pay now." He nodded, then hesitated, eyes searching mine without pressure. "About earlier," he said carefully. "If you need backup for any conversations you don't want to have alone, coffee within line of sight, check-ins, the call me at this time trick, I'm honored to be your accomplice." I exhaled. "Thank you," I said. "I might take you up on that." That night, I texted Nathan 3 sentences. "If we talk, it's at the diner. Daytime. 30 minutes. He replied, "Too fast." "Of course." I put my phone face down, opened my notebook, and wrote a list called What I Owe Myself. It wasn't long. It was clear. Outside, gutters whispered to the river. Somewhere, a hand-wash sink moved 6 inches closer to where habits are born. The diner was neutral ground by design. Windows on 3 sides, noon sun that didn't allow shadows to pretend they were anything else, and a waitress named Dee who ran the place like a truth serum. I arrived early, took the booth closest to the door, and texted Gail my check-in plan. If I send the pie emoji, call me with a fake emergency. If I send 2, make it real. She replied with 3 pie emojis and a heart for luck. Through the glass, across the street, a white truck idled. Jacob had happened to schedule a supply drop during lunch. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. Just knowing he was there made my spine remember it had a job. Nathan walked in on time, smelling like city air freshener. He looked relieved to see I was alone, which told me more than I wanted to know. "Madison," he said, sliding into the booth. "You look good." "I'm working," I said, letting the word carry the weight I meant it to. Dee topped off my coffee, ignored his, and asked me if I wanted the usual, like I'd been coming here for years. I did not have a usual. I said yes, anyway. He started where charm always starts, with the past told as if it had been unfortunate weather. "Things got complicated," he said. I panicked. I shouldn't have ended it in a coffee shop. "I'm sorry." Tenderly stoned. "I accept the apology," I said, and watched surprise flicker across his face. People expect forgiveness to be a door they get to walk back through. Sometimes it's just a bridge you cross alone. He leaned forward. "I've been thinking. You hated the hospital politics, the endless authorizations. I can fix that. A colleague has a concierge practice opening, flexible hours, high-end clients. You'd be perfect." "We could," he paused, the sentence reaching for a future it hadn't asked permission to touch. "We could try again." Across the street, Jacob unloaded a pallet and looked at the sky like weather had asked him a question. I folded my hands on the table. "Nathan," I said, making my voice the same temperature as the room, "I don't want a different box with the same walls. My niche isn't less paperwork. It's community. It's designing care where the default is dignity. Here, the work is honest. So am I." He blinked, recalibrating. "This isn't you," he said softly, then quickly corrected himself. "I mean, it's not the you I knew." "That's fair," I said. "I'm not the me you knew." Dee arrived with grilled cheese and coleslaw that believed in itself. She set the plate down like a referee declaring a round over. Nathan tried again, the way people do when they confuse persistence with romance. "We were good together." "Tenue?" "We were convenient together," I said. "Good would have stood in a bar doorway and made sure I got home safe. Silence found us and refused to be hurried." He exhaled. "So that's it?" "That's it," I said. "I wish you well." He nodded, more defeated than angry, which felt like progress for both of us. He put cash on the table, stood, and paused. "He seems solid," he said, chin tipping toward the street where Jacob was now arguing kindly with a stubborn dolly. "Don't let him make your world small." "I won't," I said. "That's not what he does." When the door closed behind him, my pulse came down a floor. I sent Gail a single pie emoji status normal and took a bite of grilled cheese that tasted like a clear boundary. Across the street, Jacob caught my eye for the first time and lifted 2 fingers from the pallet in a small salute. "I see you. You're okay." Back at the clinic, the afternoon moved with the industrious mercy of a town that had things to do. Gail listened without interrupting, then filed the whole story under the drawer labeled, "We Choose Our Lives." She handed me a note from the kitchen committee. Approval granted for the sink change, plus a small grant from the county for food safety equipment. We high-fived with the maturity appropriate to medical professionals and immediately planned a hand-washing station kids would fight to use. In the evening, I walked the river path alone. The water moved like it knew its work. Not dramatic, just persistent. Willow had given me a different kind of quiet one I didn't need to fill. My phone buzzed once, A photo from Jacob of the revised kitchen framing with a caption, "Default, clean hands." I sent back, "Design is policy," and felt the day close with a click that sounded like alignment. The emergency found us on a Tuesday that had promised nothing worse than paperwork. A siren cut through the noon lull volunteer fire department, short and insistent. Gail looked up. "Mill Road," she said, already handing me the jump bag we keep for not waiting. The call hit our radio a beat later. Single vehicle rollover near the old bridge, possible entrapment, 2 bystanders on scene. I was in the truck before the rest of the sentence finished loading. We arrived to dust, the sharp smell of coolant, and a pickup resting on its side like the earth had tilted wrong. A teenager waved his arms, frantic but useful. "We cut the engine, he's talking." Jacob jogged up from the construction site, vest, gloves, that steady face that says he'll be whatever the moment needs. The fire crew slid into position. Wedges, cribbing, cautious hands. I knelt by the windshield where a man 40s, farmer tan, eyes wide, was pinned by the steering wheel. ABCs first. Airway clear, breathing fast and shallow, radial pulse thready but present. Blood at the hairline, left leg trapped at a bad angle. "Hey, I'm Madison," I said, voice low and ordinary. "You're not alone, we're going to get you out." He told me his name between breaths. I got a set of vitals, started oxygen, and kept my hand on his shoulder to anchor his fear. Fire called for a second rig. The car complained as the cribbing took weight. Jacob knelt opposite me, calm under pressure like he'd been born there. "What do you need?" he asked. "Shade first," I said, eyes on the patient. "Keep him cool. Then when they lift C-spine steady, we'll manage the leg." Jacob had the tarp up in 30 seconds, creating a pocket of mercy. He coordinated bystanders with the quiet authority of someone who has built things in storms. "You, flag traffic. You, bring the med kit. You, water but sip it slow." When the crew finally spread the door, time did its accordion trick, everything loud and fast and precise. We slid a collar on, boarded him with careful choreography, and eased the trapped leg free. His moan was pure animal, then human again as pain found language. I palpated. Tenderness, deformity. No open fracture. Good distal pulse. "You did the hard part," I told him. "We'll splint and go." He squeezed my hand once, crushed gratitude. En route to the clinic, I called ahead. Gail had the room ready, analgesia drawn, an extra pair of hands summoned from thin air like she always does. We stabilized, x-rayed, confirmed what our fingers already knew. Tib-fib fracture, needs OR. The transport team arrived with the practiced efficiency of people who've made friends with urgency. Before they loaded him, he asked, "My daughter?" Gail was already 2 steps ahead. She'd called the school, found the right homeroom, and put reassurance in transit. When the doors closed, silence hovered, then broke into small laughter, the kind that means everyone's okay enough to let adrenaline drain. I washed my hands and found Jacob in the hallway, hair damp with sweat, shirt streaked with work. He lifted his eyebrows, question without words. I nodded. "Stable. He'll be all right." "Good," he said, exhaling the kind of breath leaders hold for the team. He glanced at the tarp, now folded by the door. "Design is policy," he said softly, "even at the side of the road." "Defaults save lives," I answered, and we both smiled at the shorthand we'd built. The rest of the day carried that crispness emergencies leave behind, edges sharper, priorities sorted. After closing, we walked the site in the lavender hour. The crew had set the last trusses on the community center. A temporary banner fluttered where a future kitchen would live. Jacob touched the frame like you pat a shoulder after good news. "Tomorrow we sheath the roof," he said. "If the weather holds, we're ahead again." I thought of the man from Mill Road, the way strangers had become a team with nothing but intention and a plan. Willow teaches you that practice the motions of care before the storm, so when the siren sounds, the body knows what to do. My phone buzzed a text from the hospital with a thumbs up and a scheduled surgery time. I sent Gail the update. she replied with a pie emoji and, inexplicably, a whisk. Kitchen meeting moved to Thursday. Her next text read, "Bring your hand wash gospel." That night, the river sounded proud. I slept like someone who'd earned it. Thursday's kitchen meeting drew a bigger crowd than usual. Word had spread about the grant, the sink, and the rumor that the county might match funds if we showed a strong plan. Easels lined the walls. The whiteboard wore 3 different marker colors like a badge, and someone had brought coffee that tasted like intention. I arrived with Gail, armed with hand wash diagrams and a list of inexpensive tools that punch above their weight. Color-coded cutting boards, thermometers that don't lie, soap dispensers kids actually want to use. Jacob stood at the front, sleeves rolled, plans clipped, the easy center of a room that wanted to agree with itself. Halfway through Q&A, the door opened and Nathan walked in, not alone. Next to him was a woman in a navy blazer and a lanyard that said he'd come prepared. "Afternoon," he said, wearing his conference voice. "Sorry to drop in. We represent a corporate philanthropy program evaluating rural health initiatives. We heard Willow's building something special. Hasmaro." The room shifted. Curiosity, caution, the electricity that runs through a crowd when money enters with a smile. The woman introduced herself as Marissa, outlined a potential partnership, funds for kitchen equipment, a stipend for community nutrition classes, promotional support, then the strings, quarterly branding events, a soft exclusivity clause on vendors, and content opportunities that sounded an awful lot like turning our neighbors into stock footage. Jacob listened, attentive but anchored. He thanked them, opened the floor, and let the town speak first. The bake sale grandmothers wanted to know if the corporate logo would be bigger than the kids' art. The high schooler asked if exclusive vendors meant the farmers market had to compete with a catalog. Gail, genial as ever, inquired who would own the data from any health classes, because ownership decides who gets to tell the story. Marissa did a polished dance. Nathan watched me, trying to read whether the room's skepticism would pull me his way. He caught my eye and added, "Softer. Madison knows how much red tape strangles good work." This could cut through. Old reflexes stirred the part of me that has wanted a bigger lever, a faster lane, a promise that help doesn't come with 100 forms. I pictured refrigerators that run cold and steady, a pantry stocked without Gail conjuring miracles every Tuesday. Then I pictured a camera crew filming a first grader learning to scrub hands because a deck needed B-roll. Jacob turned to me, not to pass the burden, but to widen the circle. "Doc?" I stood, palms flat on the table like I was grounding a patient's story in facts. "Resources matter," I said, "but so does consent and control. If support requires us to trade dignity for deliverables, we'll pay twice. Our niche is community-led care. Our policy is design. That includes who gets to put their name on our habits." Silence, then a soft rustle of people remembering why they came. A farmer raised a hand. "Match funds are good," he said. "Strings are bad." Laughter, not unkind, and a murmur of assent. Jacob nodded. "We're grateful for interest," he said to Marissa, voice steady as lumber. "If your program can meet the town's non-negotiables, no exclusivity, no branding bigger than children's art, data stays here, we'll keep talking." Marissa's smile thinned, professional. "We'll revisit terms," she said. Nathan lingered as the room dissolved into smaller conversations. "You could have made that easy," he said to me, not accusing, just disappointed on a frequency we used to share. "I made it right," I said. "Easy would have cost us more than cash." "What is on?" He looked past me to Jacob, then to the sketches of sinks and shelves where a dozen hands had written yes. "He's very sure," he said. "He's very accountable," I answered. "There's a difference." On my way out, the high schooler stopped me. "If they say no," she asked, "do we still get the thermometers?" "We'll get them," I said, "one way or another." That night, a dozen small donations hit the clinic's inbox. Anonymously, from names I recognized. Willow's match fund had begun, not with a press release, but with neighbors deciding their story didn't need a sponsor to be worth telling. The next few days moved like a river after rain, clearer, faster, no need to narrate every bend. At the clinic, our chest pain farmer called to complain cheerfully about being bored. I told him boredom was an underrated medicine. At the site, Jacob's crew sheathed the roof, the community center finally looking less like an idea and more like a promise you could bring soup to. Marissa emailed revised terms that were better, not good. Less branding, same exclusivity, light content requirements that still turned neighbors into metrics. Nathan forwarded it with a note. This is the best they can do, and a postscript I'd once been soft to. I'm trying. I believed him. I also believed Willow. The decision didn't need a meeting. It needed a moment. So we made one. Saturday, right after the farmer's market, we set a long table in the half-built community center. Paper cups, a coffee pot that wheezed like it had run marathons, a jar labeled thermometer fund that had gained weight all week. I laid out a simple agenda. What we need, what we won't trade, what we'll build anyway. Jacob opened. Not a speech, more a set of planks you could stand on. This town knows how to raise its own beams, he said. Help is welcome, ownership stays here. He looked to me, and I did the clinic version facts first, then the feeling. Hand wash, sinks, shape habits. So do contracts, I said. We can accept support, but we won't outsource consent. Right, not her heart. Nathan stood near the back, not hiding, not pushing forward. When the floor opened, he asked for it, hands empty. I brought them here because I thought money could fix friction, he said. It fixes some, not all. If I blurred the line between help and control, that's on me. It was the best I'd heard him be, honest, almost tender with his own limits. If you say no, he added, I'll still donate personally. Quietly. The room shifted the specific mercy of a small town that knows people are not their worst pitch. Jacob thanked him and moved us to action. Buckets appeared, a sign-up sheet for $10 a month club, a whiteboard where the high schooler drew a cartoon hand wash station, complete with a superhero cape. Someone taped a list of needs to the wall. Thermometers, shelving, a second prep table, a chest freezer with a temper that didn't need managing. Before the hour was up, 3 items were crossed off, and the jar had another handful of quiet yeses. When the crowd thinned, Nathan found me by the easel. You're really not coming back, are you? He asked. No accusation, just clarity finally catching up. I'm already back, I said, gesturing at the half-built kitchen. The people who had decided ours meant us. I just didn't know where home was. Jumai? He nodded, took a breath like he'd been holding it since the coffee shop months ago, and let it go. Okay, he said. Be well, Madison. Then he left the way you leave when you finally accept the door wasn't yours to open. Jacob didn't move to fill the space. He stood beside it. Proud of this town, he said quietly. I glanced at his hands, paint smudge, nicked knuckle. A life that looked used in the ways that matter. Me too, I said. He didn't reach for me. He reached for the list on the wall. Which one do we knock out next? He asked. Thermometers, I said. Defaults only work when numbers tell the truth. He grinned. Numbers and sinks. Our love language. We went back to work. Opening week arrived the way harvest does suddenly. After months of work that looked like nothing from far away and everything up close. The community center smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil. The kitchen gleamed like a second chance. Hand wash, sink front and center. Prep tables at a height that invited help. Shelves labeled in handwriting that made you trust the food before tasting it. On the wall, between the fire extinguisher and the employees must wash hands sign, the high schooler had taped her superhero drawing of a soap dispenser. We left it there, policy with a cape. We ran a final fire drill. Jacob walked exits, checked alarms, then did his ritual of standing in the doorway to feel the room like a carpenter listens for a stud. I stocked the first aid kit, rechecked the EpiPens, and stashed a roll of kid stickers in the top drawer where the thermometers lived. Gail floated through, clipboard in one hand, a roll of blue tape in the other, labeling things people would ask for before they learned the routes by heart. Ladles, gloves, the good spatula. At 4, people began to arrive with casseroles like calling cards. The bake sale grandmothers carried pies that looked like apologies to anyone who'd ever eaten a mediocre dessert. A local band tuned up in the corner, 2 guitars, a fiddle, a bass that had seen 3 generations and still held tune. Kids made a beeline for the hand wash station because we'd made it a game. The foot pump gave a satisfying whoosh and the soap smelled like oranges. Design is policy. Policy is fun. Jacob asked me to start the short remarks. Not a speech, he'd said. A thank you with a spine. I kept it simple. This kitchen exists because a town decided that health should be easier than shortcuts, I said. Every sticker a kid puts on a hand wash chart is data we can be proud of. Every thermometer check is a small truth that keeps dinner safe. We did this together, and we'll keep doing it one sink, one shelf, one shared meal at a time. Applause that felt like exhale. Jacob took over, read off names no microphone could cheapen, and ended with, "If you see something that doesn't work, tell us. Buildings aren't finished, they're learned." The room loved that permission to keep belonging. During the first serving rush, I stationed at the health table. Blood pressure checks, flu shot sign-ups, a sign-up sheet for cooking classes that filled itself in 20 minutes. A boy dragged his dad over to show me he'd washed his hands without being told, then flexed like a tiny food safety bodybuilder. I gave him a sticker. He gave me hope. Near the end, Nathan appeared in the doorway, hands in his pockets, not intruding. He caught my eye, gave a small nod, and left an envelope in the donation jar without ceremony. No logo, no pitch, just a quiet contribution to a kitchen that had already chosen its name. After cleanup, when the gym had returned to echoes and the last light held the floor in a soft square, Jacob and I stood by the hand wash sink like it was an altar. He turned the foot pump once, listened to the steady rush, and smiled. "Default set," he said. "Default set," I echoed. He hesitated, then offered his hand, not to lead but to ask. I took it. No camera, no speech, just 2 people who'd built enough trust to start. Winter slid in on quiet souls. Willow learned its routines around snow and soup, and the community center felt like the town's warm lung. Mornings, the hand wash station greeted kids on their way to breakfast club. Afternoons, the kitchen hosted classes where grandfathers taught knife safety with hands that had sharpened more than blades. Evenings, the clinic rolled in a cart for blood pressure checks and flu shots beside a pot of chili that swore vegetables could be comfort. In clinic, the farmer with the stent showed up to complain about walking 30 minutes a day while secretly bragging he'd made it to 42. Mrs. Alvarez negotiated with me about salt and left with spices that tasted like yes. The teenager with the sprained ankle joined the kitchen crew, washing his hands without being told because the foot pump made him feel like he was powering the whole project. Defaults, set. Policies, lived. Construction slowed, then settled, then shifted to the smaller acts that finish places. Door closers that don't slam, a coat hook at kid height, the sign above the sink that reads, "Hands first, always." Jacob taught me to spot level with my eyes and listen for the hum of a well-set hinge. I taught him to count a pulse by feel and read the tightness in a jaw before a patient says, "I'm fine." On Tuesdays we traded truths, his about slopes and load, mine about shock and shame. We found a common language in the phrase we'd been using all along. Design is policy, then learned how to say it softly enough to make room for other voices. Nathan sent a final email in late December, one line, "Be well, Madison." I replied, "You too," and meant it, the way you mean it when both people finally set down a story that doesn't fit anymore. The grant program never called back with terms the town could accept. We didn't wait. The thermometer fund finished itself in 10s and 5s, and the anonymous envelope with my mother's handwriting. Willow's match came from Willow. On a night when snow rehearsed for January, we hosted the center's first big pot small lessons dinner. I opened with a quick talk about safe temperatures and why soap matters more than shame. Jacob followed with a 3-minute tour of the building's choices, why the walk-in door swings out, how the ramp angle saves knees, where the emergency lights wait to not be needed. We didn't say policy once. We didn't have to. The room could feel it underfoot. Later, we walked the river path. Breath visible, boots loud, the world trimmed to essentials. At the bend where the water sounds most like a promise, Jacob stopped. "I don't want to make your world small," he said, repeating a caution that had once been handed to me like a warning flare. "You haven't," I said. "You helped me find the doors." We didn't rush a kiss into the cold. We let our hands find each other like a new habit, one we'd designed on purpose. Above us, the sky did that winter thing where stars feel closer than plans. Below, the river kept going, and so did we. By spring, the clinic's wall held a photo kids at the hand-wash sink, oranges in a bowl, a caption the high schooler lettered in careful black, "We build the world we use." The kitchen got busier. The default got easier. The town got faster at remembering what it already knew, that safety can be generous, that dignity scales, that love is best measured in the small, repeatable things. When people asked how we did it, we told the simplest version. A town noticed itself. A doctor remembered why she'd chosen this niche. An architect kept listening until the building answered, and strangers kept arriving right on time. There's no twist, really. Just the kind of ending that keeps beginning hands first, always, and then everything else.